A stoic billionaire, returned to his late sister's estate only to be paralyzed by the sight of her best friend's son in a state of silent, hollow-eyed neglect. The boy, impossibly small in the cavernous, immaculate hallway, clutched a threadbare teddy bear, its button eyes dangling by a single thread, mirroring the child's own fragile hold on the world. Why would a child be fading into a ghost in a house filled with such opulent life? And who was the polished monster casting this suffocating shadow? Julian Vance stepped out of the obsidian black sedan, the gravel of the long driveway crunching under his polished Italian leather shoes. The air was thick with the scent of late summer roses, a fragrance his sister Clara had adored. It had been a year since her passing, a year since he'd offered this house, her house, as a sanctuary to her lifelong best friend Sarah and her young son Leo. He'd been overseas, closing a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that felt meaningless in the face of the grief that still clung to him like the London fog. He was here for the annual gala for the foundation he'd started in Clara's name. But first, he wanted to see the home, to ensure Sarah and Leo were truly thriving in the haven he'd provided. The exterior was perfect, as always. The topiaries were sculpted with geometric precision, the windows gleamed, and the grand oak door shone with a fresh coat of varnish. It was a picture of serene wealth, a fortress of calm. But the moment he stepped inside, a cold draft, one that had nothing to do with the temperature, snaked around his heart. The house was silent, not peaceful, but empty. The grand foyer, usually filled with the echo of a child's play or the scent of Sarah's baking, smelled faintly of bleach and something else, something acrid and sour. He called out Sarah's name, his voice absorbed by the heavy damask curtains. No answer. He walked further in, his gaze sweeping the pristine surfaces. Not a single toy was out of place, not a crayon, not a stray block. It was the home of an adult, meticulously curated, not the vibrant, slightly chaotic space a 5-year-old should inhabit. A knot of unease tightened in his gut. This wasn't right. It was a sterile, cold perfection that felt like a carefully constructed lie. He started toward the kitchen, but a flicker of movement from the shadowed alcove under the grand staircase stopped him cold. There, sitting on the floor with his back pressed against the wall as if trying to merge with it, was Leo. Julian's breath caught in his chest. The boy wasn't just sitting, he was hiding. Leo's knees were drawn up to his chest, his arms wrapped around them in a gesture of desperate self-protection. He was wearing pajamas, though it was the middle of the afternoon, and they were thin and worn, hanging loosely on his skeletal frame. His face was pale, almost translucent, with dark, bruised-looking circles under his eyes. They were the eyes of an Rasatinu, old man, filled with a weariness that no child should ever know. Julian remembered a bright, bubbly boy who would run to him for a piggyback ride, his laughter echoing off these same marble floors. This child was a ghost, a silent, fragile echo of the boy he once was. Julian approached slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening, as if nearing a startled fawn. "Leo," he said, his voice softer than he'd intended. The boy flinched, a sharp, violent tremor that shook his entire body. He didn't look up. His gaze remained fixed on the floor, his small hands twisting the worn ear of the teddy bear he held. Julian knelt, ignoring the strain on his expensive suit trousers. He was now at the boy's level, but an impassable chasm of fear separated them. "Leo, it's me, Uncle Julian." He kept his voice a low, steady murmur. "Are you okay, little man?" For a long moment there was only silence. Then, without lifting his head, Leo whispered, the words so faint they were barely a breath of air, a sound of pure agony. "My tongue hurts so much," he rasped, his voice hoarse and cracked. "I can't wipe anymore." The words made no sense, yet they landed in Julian's soul like shards of ice. He saw the boy's chapped, cracked lips, the way he swallowed with a pained grimace. He noticed a faint soapy smell clinging to the child's clothes. Wipe? Wipe what? Tears? His nose? Then his eyes fell to the boy's hands, and he understood. The skin around his fingernails was raw and red, and a dirty smudge marred his pajama sleeve. The boy was being punished, neglected to the point where he couldn't even manage basic hygiene, and something was happening that made his mouth burn with pain. A cold, precise rage, the kind Julian hadn't felt since his days in the Special Forces, settled over him. It was not a hot, reckless anger, but a glacial certainty. He would find the source of this pain, and he would eradicate it. Just then, the front door opened, and Sarah bustled in, followed by a man Julian had never met. The man was handsome in a slick, predictable way, with a salesman's smile and eyes that didn't quite match it. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, a stark contrast to the neglected child huddled in the shadows. "Julian, oh my goodness, you're early," Sarah exclaimed, her voice a pitch too high, her smile strained. She rushed forward, but stopped when she saw him kneeling by her son. The man, Marcus, extended a hand. "Marcus Thorne, it's a pleasure to finally meet the man who owns all this." His grip was firm, his confidence absolute. Julian ignored the offered hand, his eyes never leaving Sarah. "What's wrong with Leo?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah's smile faltered. "Oh, him," she said, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "He's just being dramatic. He threw a tantrum earlier, so he's having a little time out." Marcus chuckled, a smooth, condescending sound. "The boy has a flair for the theatrical. We're trying to instill a bit of discipline. He refuses to clean up after himself, so we've had to be firm." He looked down at Leo with an expression of mild disdain. "He'll get over it." The gaslighting was so blatant, so confident, it was breathtaking. Julian looked from the polished, smiling monster to the terrified child, and then to Sarah, whose gaze wouldn't meet his. He saw her fear, her deference to this man. He saw that she had chosen this placid lie over her own son's well-being. In that moment, Julian Vance made a quiet, unbreakable vow. He would become Leo's shield. He would give this silent, broken boy a voice, and he would bring down the man who had stolen it. "Timeout is over," Julian said, his voice flat and final. He gently scooped the feather-light child into his arms. Leo stiffened for a second, then sagged against him, a silent surrender. "He's coming with me." The next few days were a carefully orchestrated campaign. Julian installed Leo and a trusted pediatric nurse in the penthouse suite of his downtown hotel, a secure fortress of glass and steel. The first order of business was a thorough medical examination. The doctor's report was a litany of quiet horrors: malnutrition, severe dehydration, early signs of oral thrush from stress and a poor diet, and faint healing bruises on his upper arms, perfectly shaped like a man's fingers. The doctor noted the raw, chapped skin on Leo's hands and the chemical burns on his tongue, consistent with ingesting a caustic substance like soap. Each word in the report was a steel plate being riveted onto Julian's armor of resolve. While Leo was being cared for, Julian began his own investigation. His first call was to his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Elias, a man who could find a ghost in a snowstorm. "I want everything on a man named Marcus Thorne," Julian said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Financials, personal history, past relationships, parking tickets. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he uses. I want to know where he buries his secrets." The second front was more delicate. Julian spent hours with Leo, not questioning him, but simply being present. He sat on the floor of the suite, building intricate structures with magnetic tiles, the city lights twinkling below them like a fallen constellation. He read stories in a low, calm voice, never pushing for a response. For 2 days, Leo remained utterly silent, communicating only with slight nods or shakes of his head. He ate ravenously, the nurse feeding him soft, nutrient-rich foods that wouldn't irritate his mouth. He slept in a bed piled high with soft blankets, but his sleep was fitful, punctuated by whimpers and small, terrified jerks. Julian watched over him, the image of the boy huddled in the dark alcove burned into his memory. This was more than a rescue. It was a reclamation of a stolen childhood. On the third day, there was a breakthrough. Julian had brought a large sketch pad and a box of vibrant, colorful pencils. He sat, near Leo, drawing a simple car. He slid the pad over to the boy. "Your turn," he said gently. Leo hesitated, his small hand trembling as he reached for a pencil. He chose a black one. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to draw. It wasn't a car or a house. It was a picture of a small stick figure boy locked inside a dark, heavily barred room. Next to the room stood a tall, smiling stick figure with sharp, jagged teeth. Julian's heart clenched. It was a child's raw, unfiltered testimony. It was the first piece of evidence. While Leo drew, Julian made another call, this time to the elderly woman who lived next door to his sister's estate, Mrs. Gable. He remembered Clara speaking fondly of her. "Mrs. Gable," he began, his tone warm and respectful. "This is Julian Vance, Clara's brother." He could hear the woman's caution over the phone. "I'm worried about little Leo. I was hoping you might tell me if you've noticed anything unusual over the past few months." There was a long pause. "Mr. Vance," she finally said, her voice quavering slightly. "That man, Mr. Thorne, he's not right. He smiles all the time, but his eyes are like chips of ice. I hear things, shouting, not from Sarah, from him. And sometimes I hear Leo crying for a long, long time, and then just silence. I wanted to call someone, but he saw me watching from my window one day, the way he looked at me. I was afraid. He has everyone charmed, the whole neighborhood. They think he's a saint for taking on a widow and her son. They don't see what I see." Her words were the first external crack in Marcus's pristine facade, a reluctant witness, terrified but honest. The fear in her voice only deepened Julian's resolve. He would not let this monster terrorize anyone else. He had the doctor's report, the boy's drawing, and now a witness. The foundation was laid. Now he needed the weapon that would bring the entire rotten structure crashing down. The call from Elias came late on the fourth night. Julian was sitting by Leo's bed, watching the boy's chest rise and fall in a peaceful, undisturbed sleep for the first time. "I have it," Elias said, his voice grim. "It's worse than we thought." Julian walked into the suite's living area, the city skyline a cold, glittering backdrop. "Tell me." Elias didn't waste words. Marcus Thorne was a predator of the highest order, a financial parasite who targeted vulnerable, recently widowed or divorced women with assets. Sarah was his third mark in 5 years. The previous 2 women had been left emotionally and financially devastated, too ashamed and broken to press charges. He would charm his way in, isolate them from friends and family, and then systematically drain their resources before disappearing. But this time, with Sarah living in a home owned by a billionaire, he couldn't just drain her finances. The house, the true prize, was untouchable. "His frustration has been escalating," Elias explained. "He's been trying to pressure her to get you, to sign the house over to her name. And he's been taking that frustration out on the boy." But that wasn't the smoking gun. "There's more," Elias continued. "The house has a state-of-the-art security system, the one you had installed for Clara. It included several discrete interior cameras. Thorne thought he had disabled them. He's good with tech, but my people are better. We pulled the data from the cloud server he thought he'd wiped." A file appeared in Julian's secure inbox. He clicked it open. His face remained impassive, a mask of stone, but inside, a volcano of fury was erupting. It was a video file, date-stamped from 3 days prior. The footage was from a small camera concealed in a smoke detector in the kitchen. It showed Marcus towering over Leo, who had accidentally spilled a glass of juice. Marcus's charming smile was gone, replaced by a mask of pure venom. The audio was crystal clear. Julian heard Marcus hiss at the terrified child, calling him a worthless little brat. He watched in horror as Marcus dragged Leo to the sink, grabbed a bar of soap, and brutally forced it into the crying child's mouth. "You want to make a mess? Then you can clean it up. Let's see how you like the taste of this," Marcus snarled on the recording. "Next time, you'll think twice." The video ended with Marcus shoving the sobbing, gagging child towards the hallway. "Go to your corner and don't make a sound until I say you can." It was the corner where Julian had found him. It was undeniable. It was monstrous. This recording was not just evidence. It was a verdict. Julian closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the silent room. He now possessed the weapon, the irrefutable truth that would shatter Marcus Thorne's carefully crafted world. He looked back at the sleeping child, a small, innocent life so nearly extinguished by the darkness of a hidden evil. The rage inside him cooled, solidifying into a diamond-hard purpose. He wouldn't just expose Marcus, he would utterly and publicly destroy him. Julian's next call was to his lawyer, a sharp, formidable woman named Alani Williams, who had a reputation for surgically dismantling her opponents in court. He sent her the video file, the doctor's report, and a summary of Mrs. Gable's testimony. He didn't need to add any commentary. The evidence spoke for itself with a deafening roar. Alani called back within 10 minutes. Her voice, usually calm and measured, was tight with controlled fury. "Julian, this is obscene. The man is a monster." "I know," Julian replied, his own voice a low growl. "I don't just want him prosecuted, I want him annihilated. I want every stone turned, every shadow he hides in flooded with light. I want his name to become a synonym for filth." "Consider it done," Alani said. "We have more than enough for criminal charges of child abuse and assault. We'll file for an emergency protective order for Leo immediately. But you want more than that, don't you? You want public justice." "He hides in the public eye," Julian stated. "So that's where we will unmask him." They spent the next hour formulating a plan, a precise, multi-pronged attack. Alani would handle the legal filings, preparing the case for the district attorney and ensuring every I was dotted, every T crossed. Julian's role would be to set the stage for the public execution. Elias's team, meanwhile, had uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. Marcus was the keynote speaker and guest of honor at the annual Children's Advocacy Charity Gala, a high-profile event taking place in 2 days. The irony was so grotesque it was almost poetic. Marcus Thorne, a man who tortured a child in private, was set to be celebrated publicly for his supposed philanthropy and dedication to children's welfare. It was the perfect stage, the highest platform from which he could fall. While Alani prepared the legal storm, Julian focused on Leo. He knew the boy's well-being was the ultimate goal, the true victory. He arranged for a leading child psychologist to meet with them, a woman with a gentle demeanor and kind eyes who specialized in trauma. She didn't push Leo to talk, but engaged him in play therapy, using dolls and a dollhouse to help him act out the feelings he couldn't articulate. Julian watched as Leo placed the daddy doll in a box and closed the lid, then moved the boy doll next to a larger protective figure. It was another silent confession, another step toward healing. The plan was set. The allies were in place. The evidence was ironclad. Julian felt the familiar calm that always preceded a critical mission. He was not acting out of blind rage, but with the cold, calculated precision of a predator hunting a predator. He was building a cage for a monster, and the door was about to slam shut. The countermove came sooner than Julian expected, a desperate gambit from a cornered animal. Sarah called him, her voice frantic, a stark contrast to her feigned nonchalance just days before. "Julian, you have to bring Leo back. He's furious. He says you've kidnapped him. He's threatening to call the police, to tell everyone you've gone crazy with grief over Clara, and you're trying to take my son." It was a classic abuser's tactic. Invert reality, paint the victim as the aggressor. "Is that what you believe, Sarah?" Julian asked, his voice chillingly calm. "Do you believe I'm the one hurting your son?" There was a pause, filled with her choked sob. I don't know what to believe. Marcus says Leo is lying, that he's doing it for attention. He says the boy is trying to drive us apart. And Julian, he asked me to marry him. He wants to be Leo's father, to adopt him legally. He wants to protect us." The words struck Julian with the force of a physical blow. It was the ultimate move for control. Marriage would entrench Marcus in their lives, giving him legal rights and making it infinitely harder for Julian to intervene. He was trying to lock the final gate to secure his victim and his prize. "Sarah," Julian said, his voice hardening, "you need to listen to me very carefully. You are in danger. Leo is in danger. This man is not who you think he is. I have proof." "Proof? What proof?" she whispered, a flicker of hope in her voice. "You'll see it," Julian promised. "Everyone will. Tomorrow night, at the gala. Just be there." He hung up, the conversation leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. He felt a pang of pity for Sarah, a woman so lost in her own grief and fear that she had become blind to the monster sleeping in her bed. but his pity was eclipsed by his duty to Leo. Marcus had overplayed his hand. His desperate proposal had just handed Julian the perfect setting for his public immolation, an engagement announcement at a charity gala. The fall would be that much greater. The ballroom of the Grand Regent Hotel was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden light over the city's elite, who mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their laughter echoing off the high, frescoed ceilings. At the center of it all was Marcus Thorne, a portrait of charm and success. He moved through the crowd with an easy grace, his arm possessively around Sarah's waist, accepting congratulations on both his philanthropic work and, as the whispers confirmed, his recent engagement. He was at the absolute zenith of his public power, bathed in the adulation he had so carefully cultivated. He took the stage to a round of thunderous applause. A massive screen behind him displayed the logo of the Children's Advocacy Charity. "Tonight is about one thing," Marcus began, his voice smooth and resonant, "protecting the most vulnerable among us. It is our sacred duty to provide a shield for those who have no voice." The hypocrisy was so profound, it was suffocating. At the back of the ballroom, Julian Vance stood in the shadows, a silent, imposing figure. Beside him was Alani Williams, and a few feet away, two plainclothes detectives waited for his signal. He gave a slight nod. As Marcus paused for dramatic effect, the massive screen behind him flickered. The charity logo vanished, replaced by the grainy, horrific footage from the kitchen security camera. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The light-hearted chatter died instantly, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. On the screen, the city's celebrated philanthropist transformed into a twisted, snarling monster. The audience saw it all: the spilled juice, the terrified child, the bar of soap being brutally forced into Leo's mouth. They heard every venomous word, every choked sob. Marcus froze at the podium, his face draining of all color. His charming smile evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed mask of disbelief and panic. He stared at the screen, at his own private ugliness exposed for the world to see, and for the first time, he was speechless. The video ended, plunging the screen back into darkness, but the images were seared into the minds of everyone present. The silence in the room was now heavy, accusatory. Julian stepped out of the shadows, his presence commanding the attention of every person in the room. He walked calmly, deliberately toward the stage. "You said it was your duty to provide a shield for those who have no voice," Julian said, his voice amplified by the microphone, clear and cold as a funeral bell. "But you are the one from whom they need shielding." Marcus whirled to face him, his eyes wild with rage and fear. "This is a lie, a fabrication. That's not me. He doctored it," he sputtered, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. But his denial was weak, pathetic. The truth had been seen. Just then, a small voice cut through the tension. "He did it. He made my tongue hurt." All eyes turned to the side of the stage where the pediatric nurse stood with Leo, who was holding Julian's hand. The boy was no longer pale and hollow-eyed. He stood tall, his voice small but clear, his eyes fixed on the man who had hurt him. He felt safe. He felt strong. He pointed at Marcus. "He's a monster." That simple, devastatingly honest testimony was the final blow. It was the truth, delivered from the mouth of the victim himself. The facade didn't just crack, it disintegrated into dust. Marcus Thorne broke. A guttural roar of fury and frustration ripped from his throat. "The little brat is lying. He's always lying," he shrieked, his polished veneer completely gone, revealing the raw, pathetic rage beneath. The two detectives moved in, flanking him on the stage. "Marcus Thorne," one said, his voice flat and official, "you're under arrest for child abuse and assault." As they cuffed him, his final desperate gaze fell on Sarah, who was staring at the screen, her face a mess of tears and dawning, soul-crushing horror. She had seen the truth, and in that moment, her world, built on a lie, collapsed around her. The aftermath was swift and total. Marcus Thorne's downfall was as spectacular as his rise had been calculated. The video from the gala went viral, a damning testament to his hidden depravity. His business partners deserted him, his supposed friends disavowed him, and the charities he had used as a shield for his ego publicly stripped his name from their donor walls. Faced with irrefutable evidence and overwhelming public scorn, he accepted a plea bargain that sent him to prison for a very long time. His name, as Julian had wished, became a whispered synonym for a special kind of evil, the kind that preys on the innocent while wearing the mask of a saint. Sarah, shattered and ashamed, cooperated fully with the authorities. She relinquished all parental rights to Leo, admitting in a tearful confession that she had been too weak and too afraid to protect her own son. Julian didn't offer her condemnation or forgiveness, only a quiet finality. He set up a trust to ensure she had a place to live and resources to seek the therapy she desperately needed. Then, he severed all contact. His focus was singular: Leo. He petitioned the court for legal guardianship, a process that was expedited by the overwhelming evidence of abuse and neglect. The judge, having seen the video, granted his request without hesitation, remarking that Leo had already found his true protector. Julian sold his sister's house, the place of so many happy memories now tainted by a dark shadow. He couldn't bear the thought of Leo ever having to step foot in it again. He poured his energy and resources into creating a new home, a true sanctuary. He bought a sprawling property on the coast, a house of glass and warm wood perched on a cliff overlooking the endless rhythmic waves of the ocean. It was a place of light and air, far from the suffocating silence of the old estate. The transformation in Leo was a quiet, beautiful miracle. With the monster gone, the fear began to recede like the tide. The dark circles under his eyes faded, replaced by the bright curiosity of a child. The silence that had enveloped him was slowly filled with new sounds. First, quiet hums as he played, then single words, and finally, hesitant sentences. The child psychologist continued to work with him, helping him build a new vocabulary for his feelings, one that didn't involve the coded language of pain. The house by the sea became their world. They spent their days walking on the beach, Julian teaching Leo how to skip stones across the water's surface. They built magnificent sandcastles, complete with moats and towers, only to laugh as the tide came in to claim them. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Julian reading stories of brave knights in faraway lands, Leo curled up beside him, his head resting on Julian's arm. The threadbare teddy bear with the dangling button eye was retired to a place of honor on a bookshelf. It was replaced by a new one, a fluffy, bright-eyed bear that Leo named Julian Jr. One crisp autumn evening, about 6 months after the gala, Julian was standing on the deck watching the sunset paint the sky in strokes of orange and purple. Leo came outside, holding a piece of paper. He had been drawing for hours, a focused, happy energy about him. He shyly handed the drawing to Julian. It wasn't a picture of a boy in a dark, locked room. It was a vibrant, colorful drawing of their house by the sea. 2 figures stood on the deck, holding hands. One was very tall, the other very small. Both were smiling under a bright yellow sun. Julian's throat grew thick with emotion. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around the small boy, holding him close. "It's beautiful, Leo," he whispered. "It's perfect." Leo hugged him back, his small arms squeezing with surprising strength. He pulled back slightly, looked Julian right in the eye and said, his voice clear and full of a light that had been absent for so long, "My tongue doesn't hurt anymore. I love you, Dad." The word, Dad, echoed in the vast open air, not a replacement for the father he'd lost, but a new title, earned through protection and love. It was the sound of a new beginning, the final triumphant note in a story of rescue and restoration. In the end, we see that the most profound darkness often disguises itself in the most polished and respectable forms. Evil rarely announces itself with thunder and lightning. It smiles, it charms, it hosts charity galas, and wins the trust of a community. It preys on silence, thriving in the spaces where victims are too afraid to speak and witnesses are too intimidated to intervene. But this story teaches us that a single voice, armed with unwavering truth, can shatter the most convincing illusion. True strength is not found in dominance or control, but in the quiet, resolute courage to protect the vulnerable. It is the strength to see past the perfect facade and hear the silent screams hidden beneath. It is the conviction that one small, broken life is worth more than all the power and prestige in the world. How many children like Leo suffer in silence, their pain dismissed as tantrums or theatrics? And how many of us look away, convinced by the charming lies of the monsters who walk among us? The measure of a society is not in how it treats its strongest members, but in how it shields its most fragile. We hope this story has moved you and served as a reminder of the quiet heroes who fight battles we never see. Have you ever witnessed a situation where your intuition told you something was wrong, even when everything looked perfect on the surface? Have you ever had to be a voice for someone who couldn't speak for themselves? Please share your stories and reflections in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and they can inspire courage in others. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and may we all find the strength to be a light in the darkness.